There goes the music. Thank you for all your texts. Nick and Nikki, we've been saved by the bell, as it were. Great to have your company on the panel today, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your ears. Thank you for your time and your energy joining us on the panel. Checkpoint is next with Lisa Owen.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei, a massive fire in the Auckland suburb of Onehunga forces evacuations. We're live at the scene with the latest. Police investigating the killing of baby Roo say they know who got rid of vital evidence. We speak to the lead detective. Corrections is still struggling to recruit frontline staff as the prison muster grows, including more violent extremist inmates. 5,000 metres under the sea, a team of scientists head to unexplored territory off Aotearoa's coast looking for new life. And forget cheese dreams, there's a potential nightmare on the horizon. The extinction of brie and camembert. Cheese Louise. You can watch us live on the RNZ website, Facebook and Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Tēnā tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. Firefighters are battling to contain a large industrial fire in the Auckland suburb of Onehunga, where evacuations are underway. Fire and Emergency says 22 crews are on the ground working to contain the large fire that is 60 metres by 50 metres in size. Amy Williams reports.
The blaze broke out on a large wood pile at a waste facility early this afternoon, sending smoke across the southern motorway. Police have begun evacuating those affected by the fire. One structure is on fire and a second structure is being threatened. Businesses near the major fire have described the smell of smoke and burnt plastic. Firefighters say households and workplaces in the area of the fire should close windows, doors and ventilation systems.
Meanwhile, Fire and Emergency is responding to a significant vegetation fire in the Lee Valley in the Tasman district. There are 3 separate areas of fire spreading uphill into a pine plantation. The government has confirmed it's scrapping the prison reduction target and will no longer fund cultural reports used in sentencing. Justice Minister Paul Goldsmith says the Section 27 reports cost taxpayers more than $7 million in the last financial year and led to shorter sentences. Mr Goldsmith says other legislation will cap jail sentence discounts at 40%. The previous government's target to reduce the prison population by 30% will also be dumped. Corrections Minister Mark Mitchell says there should only be fewer people in prison if there's a drop in serious offending. Police say they can't arrest the 3 people being investigated for the death of a Lower Hutt toddler. Ruthless Empire Ahipeni War, also known as Baby Roo, died in October after suffering blunt force head injuries at his home in Taita. The investigation has centred on 3 adults who were there, but Detective Inspector Nick Pritchard says more evidence is needed to charge them. He says they have a right to silence and can't be charged with obstruction either.
The law doesn't allow us to take a blanket approach and charge people just because they were at the location at that time. In order to charge someone, we need the evidence to a high standard, and it stands against each individual.
Nick Pritchard says police believe the trio know what happened and haven't told the whole truth. Iwi leader Mike Smith says he's excited that he can pursue a court case against 7 big polluters for helping cause climate change. The climate activist of Ngāpuhi and Ngāti Kahu will have his full case heard in court after the Supreme Court ruled his case can proceed. Mr Smith isn't seeking money and says he wants a safer world. 2 of the companies, Genesis and Fonterra, say the ruling will delay work on cutting emissions. January saw some record-breaking temperatures in parts of the country. Niwa says it has been a very dry start to the year, with below normal rainfall for much of the North Island. Christchurch recorded almost 300 hours of sunshine, making it the city's sunniest January since records began in 1930. The highest temperature for the month was 35.1 degrees Celsius, recorded at Hanma Forest in Canterbury on January the 13th. Hurunui's mayor says firefighters across the region are feeling the stress of being called out to one fire after another as the relentless hot weather continues. A blaze near the Waipara River on Waitangi Day closed State Highway 1, while firefighters from 15 brigades worked to bring it under control. Marie Black says there doesn't appear to be any relief ahead, with the hot weather set to continue in coming months.
If we look at the weather predictions, probably the next couple of months are predicted to be dry, so we don't see any relief in the forecast in the immediate future, and it'll be a godsend if we do get some change.
Marie Black says North Cantabrians are used to having a heightened awareness of fire at this time of year, but the repeat events are having an impact on the community. To sport now, and New Zealand have South Africa on the ropes late on day 4 of the first cricket test in Tauranga. South Africa have slumped to 209 for 8, still needing over 300 runs for victory. The Black Caps declared their second innings at 179 for 4, setting South Africa 529 for victory. Pace bowler Kyle Jamieson has been the most successful of the Black Cap bowlers, taking 4 wickets. Meanwhile, New Zealand great Sir Richard Hadlee hopes he doesn't remain an Australian for too much longer in the eyes of cricket's Hall of Fame. Hadlee, Debbie Hockley and the late Martin Crowe have all been listed as Australians on the ICC's Hall of Fame website. Hadlee, who is now 72, was among the inaugural inductees in 2009 and says he was unaware of the error.
It's an error, and I just hope it's corrected, and people will know that Martin and Debbie and myself are all from New Zealand, so it's not an issue for me.
The football Ferns have got off to a winning start in the Olympic women's qualifying tournament in Samoa with a 3-0 win over Tonga. The winner of the tournament will qualify for Paris Games later in the year. And the Breakers' worst fears have been confirmed today, with star American import Anthony Lamb out for the rest of the NBL basketball season with a ruptured Achilles tendon. The former NBA player suffered the injury in the weekend's win over Perth and now needs surgery, which will see him sidelined for 9 months. The Breakers must win 3 of their last 4 regular season games to advance to the playoffs. Koinanga pita kōrero. That's the news.
The Prime Minister criticised for his speech at Waitangi.
He never got to the crux of Seymour's policy and ensuring that Māoridom had confidence in him.
Mr Luxon is unapologetic.
Well, look, it was deliberate. I want repetition and consistency, particularly when there's a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding about our support for the treaty.
And Labour's leader asks why go ahead with treaty legislation.
If he's saying that they're not going to support it and they're not going to continue with it, why bother introducing it? It will be a very divisive debate.
Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. For the North Island, except Wairarapa and Wellington, generally fine. Some cloudy areas, especially in the mornings and evenings. Wairarapa and Wellington, partly cloudy. Some rain tomorrow evening. Marlborough and Nelson, mainly fine. Isolated showers tomorrow afternoon and evening. Bulla, Westland and Canterbury, rain in southwestland, spreading elsewhere tomorrow morning, then clearing to fine. Isolated showers about inland Canterbury tomorrow afternoon and evening. Otago, excluding Clutha, cloudy periods today with isolated showers. Tomorrow mainly fine. Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, remaining showers clearing this afternoon and becoming mostly fine. A few showers tomorrow. And for Kohu, Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines at about 20 past 5.
Ngā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Nelson Tasman Civil Defence says it is dealing with a vegetation fire in the Lee Valley, with multiple fire crews and helicopters responding. The fire is understood to have broken out just before 4 p.m. Police are assisting with evacuating people from local swimming spots, and road closures are in place. We'll have more on this throughout the programme. Meanwhile, evacuations are underway and health orders have been issued in an Auckland suburb because of a massive fire in Onehunga. Helicopters and more than 20 fire crews are dealing with the blaze at the Gorilla Waste facility. Black smoke has been pumping into the air and residents far away from the scene can see and smell it. The facility is near State Highway 20 and the Manukau Harbour. The council says the evacuations are mostly local businesses. Our reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi are at the scene, and Louise joins us now. Louise, what's the situation?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, crews have been battling this fire since about 1 p.m. today out here in Onehunga, and as you mentioned earlier, it is an industrial rubbish fire. You can probably hear behind me there are helicopters circling, desperately dumping gallons of water onto the blaze, really desperate to put it out at the moment. It's a bit of a rush here at the scene, and there's been plenty of crew on the ground, about 22 crew here, working hard since 1 p.m, desperately trying to put this blaze out.
And Lou, for those people who are listening, not watching, you are masked up. So what is the situation with smoke?
That's right. So almost instantly, as soon as we got out of the car here in Onehunga this afternoon, we were hit by the pungent fumes from that smoke, which is billowing into the sky as we speak. It's grey and it's black, and it's been seen all across Auckland this afternoon. So the advice to residents is to mask up and try and avoid the area if possible, but if not, be shutting those windows and doors.
And firefighters, still plenty of them there?
Yeah, so 22 crew on the ground at the moment, and those helicopters behind me have been continuously dumping that water for about the last hour or so that we've been stationed here. So yeah, plenty of crew still out on the ground, and we've seen them evacuating residents and nearby businesses who are in the area, but it has been cordoned off with cones as well, so people are being diverted and traffic is being turned away.
Yeah, tell us a bit more about the traffic. Is it bad in the area?
Yeah, so this afternoon NZTA has told motorists to try and avoid the southwestern motorway if possible. So that's the area between, so it's on State Highway 20 northbound between Massey Road and Nelson Street. There's going to be big delays. It was already building as we headed out here this afternoon, and it's expected to get worse into tonight. So something to bear in mind for commuters on their way home tonight. And also the southern motorway as well. Try and avoid that one. But also Healthline has advised people that if they are having trouble breathing from the smoke this afternoon, to contact Healthline or their doctor.
Thank you for the update, Louise. That is Louise Tanuth, our reporter out there with camera operator Marika Habazi near that fire in Onehunga. The buzz of choppers dropping water on it in the background there. 5:10, kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Prime Minister says a second election would have been needed if he didn't agree to support ACT's Treaty Principles Bill to Select Committee. That's where National and New Zealand First support ends, but ACT isn't giving up hope. It can change their minds. And David Seymour says he could give it another go if it fails this time. Here's our political reporter, Giles Dexter.
The call from Waitangi was clear. Kill the bill.
How many times has the Prime Minister has to respond to the same kōrero? You and your shitty-ass bill are going down the toilet.
Tangibly, would you like to hear the Prime Minister actually killing the Treaty Principles Bill in its tracks?
Yes. National says it will support the Treaty Principles Bill to the Select Committee stage, but no further. Given the bill's apparently doomed, some on the treaty grounds said it should be scrapped before it's even started. On Morning Report, the Prime Minister said it wasn't so simple. ACT made it an absolute bottom line.
The alternative is you put New Zealand back through an election process, but we have to get in a room, we have to get parties that have different policies and different principles to be able to come and work together, and we came to a compromise.
Barrister Graham Edgeler says there is precedent for a government to introduce a bill it doesn't intend to progress. Equally, there have been instances of it changing its mind, like 3 strikes in 2010.
National said, OK, we'll have a bill. It'll deal with our bit, life means life for the worst murderer, and we'll add in 3 strike sentencing stuff as well, but only as far as Select Committee. And then, once it got to Select Committee, the government was talked around and agreed to support a variation of it going forward.
And that's what ACT is holding on to, launching an information campaign on the bill, hoping it will muster up enough public support to twist the coalition partners' arms.
I believe in the democratic process, that the will of the people can be transmitted through our parliamentary process. It's not always perfect, I'll be the first to admit, but I believe that it's possible.
The Prime Minister is not for turning.
I don't think that's a possibility. I think the reality for us is that it's been a long-standing position of the National Party, my own personal view as well. It's not something that we support at all.
Anyone can make a submission on the bill. Some can choose to turn up to Parliament and speak to the Select Committee in person. But people RNZ spoke to in Wellington and New Plymouth aren't massively convinced it's worth it.
I think there are more important things to consider before going on to this.
Yeah, if the Prime Minister, the head of the country, has a clear view on what he needs to do, why are we still talking about it, I guess?
It is what it is, so we'll just have to fight for what we've been fighting for our whole lives, to be honest.
The outcome's already known, so it's sort of wasting people's time.
And I feel as though they're making a big fuss about something that probably won't happen anyway.
Graham Edgeler says even if the bill doesn't go beyond the committee stage, calling the process a waste of time is a bit far.
Having that public discussion where they may be able to refine their policy. And, okay, well, here were the three restarted in 6 months ago when we started the fourth Select Committee. We've kept them in some form, but actually here's the policy that we will change going forward and campaign on the next election on. We've already had public discussion about this, and we listened to you, and here are the changes we made.
And David Seymour isn't ruling out having another crack down the line.
Well, sometimes these things can take a few goes. I'm hoping for a hole in one here as always, but if you look at end-of-life choice, there were 2 attempts at legislation. There was a fulsome Select Committee inquiry, and then euthanasia became legal with the End-of-Life Choice Act. That took 14 years. I certainly hope that this doesn't take that long.
The Prime Minister says he hopes it's all over by the end of the year.
Political reporter Giles Dexter there. Police investigating the killing of baby Roo say they know who got rid of vital evidence in the case. The little boy died of blunt force injuries after being taken to Hutt Hospital in October last year. He was just a few days short of his 2nd birthday. Investigators are still looking for items they say were deliberately removed from the Poole Street property, including a bit of blue duvet cover, a CCTV system and the system's power backup. They maintain 3 people were in the house when baby Roo was fatally injured, and they know what happened, but they aren't telling the truth. Detective Inspector Nick Pritchard can't say, though, when there will be an arrest.
A lot of information has been gathered, and the team are currently reviewing all of that material and carrying out any other inquiries that are generated from that to give us a full assessment to be able to put ourselves in a position at some stage with the goal of being able to charge those responsible. At this stage, too early to tell. It's quite a complex investigation. Some homicides are resolved quickly, but unfortunately in this case it will take a bit of time.
You have been clear about the fact that you believe there were 3 people in the house when baby Roo was fatally injured. How many people do you think were involved in inflicting those injuries?
That's not determined at that stage. Definitely 3 people there from our investigation. In terms of who's inflicted the injuries, we don't know if it was one or more of those persons. We're still to establish that.
So you don't think it was a single person?
At this stage, we can't determine if it was one or more. We're keeping an open mind. All 3 persons of interest are still persons of interest. We have not ruled any of them out. So at this stage, I can't put a definitive number on who we think was responsible.
What is the likely scenario given the evidence you have so far?
What we have established is that the time baby Ruthless was injured, those 3 persons of interest were at the property. We have established that the injuries were sustained that morning. The injuries were blunt force trauma, which resulted in a fractured skull. How those injuries were inflicted, we're unsure. However, I can tell you that to cause an injury of that nature, the head had to have come into contact with a hard surface or a hard object. But I can't give you any information about the mechanism of that and how it occurred.
Is it your belief that all the people in the house know what happened?
From all the facts that we've established in this investigation, I believe all three have knowledge of what happened that morning.
So on that basis, are they not obstructing your investigation if they're not telling you what happened and therefore can be arrested?
No, everyone has a right to silence, so they don't have to talk to the police. We have engaged with all of the persons of interest. Some have been interviewed more than others. I won't go into details of what they've said, but we're not satisfied that we have received a full truthful account from anyone that was inside that property.
So the pieces of evidence that you have been seeking that are missing, a hard drive for a CCTV security system, some duvet material, who got rid of those?
We're still investigating that, and we have established who we believe is responsible. However, we're still working through and gathering the required evidence to support a charge relating to that. I can say that the items are still outstanding, and if anyone out there has them or knows where they are, I really encourage them to come forward and tell the police.
There's CCTV cameras, security cameras all over the place these days and down and around Wellington also. Have you not been able to track the movements of the vehicle that you think were used to a dump site?
Yeah, during the investigation, we've collated a large amount of CCTV footage from various sources, and from that have built a timeline in terms of movements of persons of interest in the vehicle. We executed a large number of search warrants at residential properties around Wellington as a result, but unfortunately we're not able to recover those items.
In terms of the materials you're looking for, including this hard drive, do you think they've been destroyed, burnt?
I'm not sure. It's not possible for me to say. I'm keeping an open mind as to whether it's been destroyed or whether it is somewhere out there being safeguarded. If it is, police will really want to have it, to review it, and I really urge anyone who's got any information at all about its whereabouts to come forward.
Where are the three people that you're interested in?
They're still locally within New Zealand, but I won't give specific locations as to where they are.
Is there any restrictions on their movement, i.e. leaving the country?
We monitor that. They're not facing charges in relation to the investigation, so they are free to move around the country.
I just want to circle back to where we started off, because people will be looking at this. A child is dead, some months have passed. You say you know these three people are involved, and yet there seems to be no arrests on the horizon. Must be pretty frustrating.
It's frustrating that we can't provide closure to the whānau and friends, but the team are dedicated, they are focused, and they have the goal to continue as long as it takes in order to hold those person or persons responsible to account.
And that is Detective Inspector Nick Pritchard there. It is 21 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. If you are near that fire in Onehunga, let us know what it is like. Can you see and smell the smoke? 2101 on text, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for us to go to the headlines now. Ko Evie Anō tēnei.
The government has confirmed it's scrapping the prison reduction target and will no longer fund the cultural reports used in sentencings. Justice Minister Paul Goldsmith says Section 27 reports have cost taxpayers more than $7 million in the last financial year and led to shorter sentences. Onehunga people downwind of a large wood chip fire had to be evacuated from homes and businesses this afternoon as more than 20 fire crews fought the waste facility blaze. The blaze sent smoke across the southern motorway early this afternoon and it has filled the air with the smell of burnt plastic. Meanwhile, fire crews are responding to a significant vegetation fire in the Lee Valley in Nelson's Tasman district. 3 separate fires are reported to be spreading uphill into a pine plantation, and fire helicopters are supporting ground crews. NIWA figures show last month's high temperatures broke records in several parts of the country. January saw higher than normal sea level pressure from a marine heatwave, which intensified coastal waters, with the highest temperature being 35.1 degrees in Hanmer Forest on January 13th. And iwi leader Mike Smith says he is excited that he can pursue a court case against 7 big polluters for helping cause climate change. The climate activist of Ngāpuhi and Ngāti Kahu will have his full case heard in court after the Supreme Court ruled it can proceed. Mr. Smith says he's not seeking money and just wants a safer world. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Auckland on the southern motorway, State Highway 1, a crash is blocking the right lane northbound between Ellerslie-Panmure Highway and Green Lane. Pass with extra care and expect delays. And you're also advised to avoid the southern motorway if you can, because of that pungent smoke in the area with an industrial premises ablaze in Onehunga. Our next traffic news and headlines are at 20 to 6.
Kia ora rā, iho. After looking like a wrap, South Africa has put up some serious resistance in the first cricket test against the Black Caps in Tauranga. Set an enormous total to chase, the tourists have spent the afternoon frustrating the Kiwis with a stubborn partnership before they finally made the double breakthrough after a short time ago. Well, joining me now is sports reporter Jonty Dine. OK, so the Proteas are digging in, eh, Jonty?
Well, they were, Lisa, but we're getting pretty close to a New Zealand win now. Most predicted things would be done and dusted by now, and South Africa only have the 2 wickets in hand now. Still 300 runs behind, so a lot of work for them to do. New Zealand declared overnight and set 529 to win, which would have been a record chase if they did get there. Southey and Henry both struck early, and it looked like they could wrap it up before lunch. But then David Bedingham and Keegan Peterson, they stuck in. Bedingham with 87, and Peterson, he faced 63 balls for just 16 runs. So they didn't just lie down, which was nice to see. But when their wickets fell, they started to tumble again. Kyle Jamieson now has 4, so he's hunting a fifer. And we did just have a pretty bizarre dismissal with Clyde Fortain. He swept Glenn Phillips, but it went straight into the shin of Tom Latham. He was wearing a shin guard, thankfully, but it just popped straight into the air. So a nice, easy catch for Tom Blundell. So pretty much sums things up for South Africa. They need an absolute miracle from here, while New Zealand, again, just the two wickets needed to go 1-0 up in the series.
Let's talk about the Breakers. The road to the playoffs has got a whole lot tougher for them.
It has, yes. So the worst fears for fans were confirmed today with star American import Anthony Lamb. He has, in fact, ruptured his Achilles tendon. He requires surgery and he'll be out for at least 9 months. So he was pulled from the court just 8 minutes into the Perth game at the weekend, and it didn't really look good at the time. And now the Breakers only have 4 games left in the regular season, and they really need to win at least 3 of those to guarantee a playoff spot. But Coach Mody Moore, he held a press conference today and said despite the setback, they're still confident of getting to the postseason.
The moment Anthony got hurt and he went to the bench, we knew it was a serious one. All the players knew it was a serious one. Heartbroken for Anthony. This is his first time he's stepped outside of the U.S. to play. He obviously played very well. There were a lot of great options ahead of him. But in today's basketball, this is not the end of anything. He'll go through a nice rehab for 9 months and come back on the other side of it a better player, and I'm sure he's going to do great. I'm confident that we will put our best foot forward and we'll do things to the best of our ability. And I believe that with the roster that we have now, if we play at our best, we can beat anyone.
So as you heard, Moy's gutted for a star, and so are the players. But Mody said they've been here before. Of course, Finn Delaney, he's only just come back from a long layoff, and Mody said it's just a matter of the rest of the squad stepping up that little bit extra for Lamb. The Breakers, they play the Hawks this weekend. That's a team they haven't beaten all season, but they are in do-or-die territory now. Mody said he was worried about how the injury may affect the team, but today at training he saw a side that had taken it in its stride, and they were ready to take care of business.
Thank you, Jonty. That is Sports reporter Jonty Dine there. Auckland Transport is reminding its drivers about capacity limits after complaints students were crammed into a school bus on a trip from Hibiscus Coast to North Shore. Someone whipped out their phone on the journey last week, capturing the scene, including one student standing on a seat during the ride. Joining us now is Auckland Transport Manager of Public Transport Operations, Rachel Kara. Kia ora, Rachel. How jammed was that bus last week?
Kia ora, Lisa. Look, from the video footage that we saw as well, there was obviously a number of children on board that service, standing, which is safe to do within capacity limits, but obviously the behaviour in terms of climbing over the seats, that's unacceptable, and that's not what we expect to see on board.
Was that bus over capacity?
Look, I've been unable to pinpoint that exact service, Lisa, which is why it's really important, and we're encouraging all students to tag on and off buses so that gives us accurate loading information, so that when we're reviewing our capacity information on a daily basis, we're able to identify these services.
How is capacity generally?
At the moment, we have seen, particularly with school buses, there have been a few instances of heavy loadings and a few that were at capacity over the last week. On the wider PT network, we're seeing things definitely ramp up. We're the busiest we've been in 5 years, but there is absolutely still capacity to be carrying our customers around.
So when you talk about heavy loading, are you talking about a situation when there are too many kids, you're above capacity?
No, when I'm talking about heavy loading, I'm talking about getting sort of above that 80% threshold. That's what we call a heavy loading. Obviously, we don't carry, when we're at capacity, there's a limited number of children or adults that can board any bus service.
You sure that bus didn't go over capacity?
And that's why I'm saying it's really important that children and students, they tag on and off the hop device so that we can get an accurate count of the number of students that are on that bus service, so we can identify where we've got, heavy loadings across the network.
But you can't tell me whether or not school bus services have been running over capacity.
I know that we've had a couple that have run at capacity, absolutely, and some that have had heavy loadings, and those are the ones that we're looking at and coming up with solutions as to how we can resolve those.
So what happens if you've got a full bus and it pulls up to the stop and there are more kids?
That's for the bus driver to actively manage in terms of their on-board count, and obviously only take as many students as they're able to within that safe limit.
So leave the kids behind?
Depends if there's another service that's coming along, or children are able to board our urban services that also service a number of these schools.
So leave them behind?
No, we don't want any child left behind. We want the bus driver to be actively informing us, our day of operations team or the depot, so that we can come up with a solution to get that child to where they need to go.
Yep, understand that, Rachel, but if a bus comes along, it's full to capacity and you don't want your drivers to take another student, you are saying that the driver should move on and leave the kids behind to get another service or make other arrangements.
As we come up with a plan to pick up the additional children that weren't able to be carried on the earlier service, yes.
So what, do drivers radio back to base and you sort something else out?
Yes, they can radio back to base. They can also, which then informs us in real time of any issues, and then we can see what we can do to dynamically manage that situation.
Have you had complaints from schools in relation to the service, the trip that was videoed?
We've had a couple of complaints through this week in terms of services that were full, and we're actively discussing the situation with the school, looking at whether we can put on extra large buses and whether that will solve the issue. We're also talking with our operators around whether we're able to put on an additional service at a couple of these locations based on bus fleet and driver availability.
So has services been trimmed back so much now that you've got buses that are jam-packed?
That's not the situation at all. We're actually in a really strong position in terms of fulfilling our timetable. Last year, you'll remember we had a bus driver shortage. This year, we're in a really strong place to run all of our scheduled services. What we're seeing is a number of children, particularly on some of the North Shore routes, wanting to use those school bus services. So we're talking with the school around what that looks like and helping them with other alternative bus services that students can also board to take their journey.
So does that look like more buses on the routes?
For some instances, it may well be, yes, depending, like I said, on operator availability, if that's what the capacity information that we're checking on a daily basis is informing us.
And when will you make that decision, Rachel?
We're reviewing that data daily. So I know right now the team are having conversations with a couple of operators around extra large buses that they think they will solve the problem in a couple of locations. And then there's I guess we will determine whether that is sufficient, and then we can always look at additional services if the operator has fleet and drivers available.
Rachel, you know how you said that drivers are supposed to radio back if there are any issues. Did you hear from the driver of that bus that seemed to be absolutely heaving?
No, I haven't had any notification on that one.
Thanks for your time this evening. That is Rachel Kara from Auckland Transport. She's the Manager of Public Transport Operations. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. I'm interested if your children were on that bus. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? What is the situation? Are they very tight on space at the moment? Now, in a statement, Carmel College Principal Sarah Kimball says they've been in touch with AT and have discussed their concerns with Rosemary College with regards to overcrowding on the buses, and she says they look forward to a positive resolution for the students. 27 minutes away from 6, Kia amo tōne mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is, of course, time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e INA ko Nona Peltier. Nona joins me in the studio. Let's talk about unemployment rates, Nona. Annual rate of unemployment rose to 4% in the last 3 months of 2023. How's the market reacted to that?
Well, it's been an interesting response because that isn't what the market was expecting, nor was it what the Reserve Bank was expecting. Unemployment was expected to have risen to about 4.2% from 3.9%, but it only raised itself by 0.1%. Now, that's nowhere near what the market had been expecting. And in fact, some were expecting it to even go higher than that, possibly because we've seen very strong population growth. We've been talking about that over the last little while. And also, we've also talked about how there's fewer job ads, that employers are looking for fewer staff, if they're looking at all. And so those things combined sort of gave us the sense that maybe unemployment was going to rise higher, and that, perhaps the heat had come out of the market or the economy more than we thought. But that isn't the case. And so that means that interest rates are likely to remain higher for longer. You're not going to see a quick cut that some had been anticipating. And because unemployment is still, weaker, or rather, I guess, stronger. I guess it's a funny number. But at 4%, it's not exactly back to where it's expected to rise to about 5.2%. It's not anywhere close to doing that. And so that is even with those very big population growth numbers.
Okay, consumers, on a different topic, are struggling to distinguish fact from fiction when it comes to sustainability claims. Oh, greenwashing, is that what it is?
It's about greenwashing.
Yeah.
So consumers who do care about sustainability issues, 1 in 4 are prepared to pay more for their goods if there's a sustainability claim, but really only if it can be easily somehow verified. 1/3 of those consumers who are willing to pay more will shop sustainably. Will work hard to verify those claims, and it's not easy to do so. So a report was done by EY looking into what businesses ought to be doing. And they're saying, look, get on board with this and do your job to make sure it's clear to consumers what you're offering and what the sustainability proposition is. If it isn't, you'll be losing value in terms of brand, because consumers will not like to be, confused or lied to, and a big word there. But yeah, I mean, if your claims can't be sustained or they're not honest, you're going to damage your brand. And that also goes for brand New Zealand. We often hear about, our pure image and so on. But if there are failings there, New Zealand's brand is just as vulnerable as any brand. So it's, people really need to watch what they say and make sure that what they do say can be verified.
Okay, take us through the markets, please.
Okay, so we had some interesting market reaction then to those unemployment data. So the dollar ticked up a little bit, about half a cent to 61 US cents, 93.5 Australian and 48.1 British pence. Interestingly, the local top 50 index, it rose just 23 points to 11,952. That's because we're still seeing some trouble in China. It's not clear what's happening with that market, so we're very much affected by what happens in the Asian markets. They're a little bit not sure about which way things are going. The U.S. dollar is, again, the bets are off that the U.S. Federal Reserve will cut interest rates anytime soon. So, it's one of those same old stories. What's going on in China and the US really determines what happens here in our markets.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier there with Business News. King Charles has been seen in public for the first time since the public announcement of his cancer diagnosis. He and his wife, Queen Camilla, waved to passers-by as they were driven from their home at Clarence House to nearby Buckingham Palace. The King also had a brief catch-up with his estranged son, Prince Harry. The BBC's Daniela Ralph reports.
A first image of the King since news of his cancer diagnosis was made public. Being driven into Buckingham Palace with his wife, Queen Camilla, after beginning his treatment in a London hospital. This afternoon, the couple headed by helicopter to the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, where the King will spend time resting in between treatment. It is a place those who work with him say he finds solace and happiness. Before he left London, there was a family visitor to host. Straight from the airport to see his father, the Duke of Sussex is back in the UK, flying in from his home in California. He spent around 45 minutes in Clarence House with the King, who'd phoned him to tell him of his cancer diagnosis. The father and son were last together in May for the King's coronation. The relationship has been strained in recent years, but this may be a moment for a thaw.
My sense is, although this is a national institution, the royal family at its core is a family just like any other, and when a member of your family is unwell, you want to go and see them, you want to express your love and support, and you want to do what you can to help.
Professor Medwin Hughes.
With the King clearing his diary and focusing on his cancer treatment, royal duties are now for the wider family. Princess Anne carried out an investiture at Windsor Castle this morning. She already has one of the busiest royal diaries. She then travelled to Nottingham for some scheduled engagements there. With the Queen, the Prince of Wales and the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, she is likely to have to take on more public duties to support the King while he's unwell. Princess Anne said nothing about the cancer diagnosis, but earlier the Prime Minister offered his support to the royal family.
Like everyone else, you're shocked and sad, and just all our thoughts are with him and his family. And, thankfully, this has been caught early, and now everyone will be wishing him that he gets the treatment that he needs and makes a full recovery.
The King will now rely heavily on the support of his family, both privately and publicly. Last Friday, the Queen opened a new support centre for cancer patients and their families at a hospital in North London. She came here already knowing of her husband's diagnosis.
That visit last week must have been incredibly challenging on a personal level for the Queen.
Can't imagine how difficult last week must have been for her, knowing that life was changing and had been turned upside down. But what happens quite quickly after a cancer diagnosis is that a treatment path emerges.
With his family on Christmas Day at Sandringham, the King is now back here, for the time being out of the public eye, to concentrate on his recovery.
19 minutes away from 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Let us know your thoughts on school buses. If you've got eyes on the fires in different parts of the country, do give us a sit rep. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can always email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie is here with the headlines. Anea Evie, mena pita kōrero.
The government's confirmed it will no longer fund the cultural reports used in sentencings, saying they've cost taxpayers millions of dollars and led to shorter sentences. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon says Section 27 reports were originally intended to allow family or friends of a defendant to tell a judge about their circumstances, but have instead turned into a moneymaker for professionals. Christopher Luxon says the changes won't lead to discrimination against defendants with lower incomes because anyone can still ask people to advocate for them in court. Police say they're frustrated that they're unable to make progress on the investigation into the death of Lower Hutt toddler baby Roo. Detective Inspector Nick Pritchard has told Checkpoint the toddler suffered blunt force trauma caused when his head came into contact with a hard surface. He told the programme none of the 3 adults in the house have been telling the truth. 2 major fires are keeping dozens of fire crews busy this afternoon. Firefighters and helicopters in Nelson's Tasman district are dealing with fires threatening a pine plantation in the Lee Valley area. Police have been evacuating people from nearby properties and local swimming pools. Meanwhile, Onehunga people downwind of a large wood chip fire had to be evacuated from homes and businesses this afternoon. More than 20 fire crews have been battling the large fire at a waste facility in Onehunga. And ACT leader David Seymour remains confident that changing his coalition partners' minds on the treaty principles bill is possible if the public demands it. National and New Zealand First say they'll support the bill to the select committee stage, but no further. ACT has launched an information campaign hoping to gather enough public support to convince Parliament to advance the bill to a referendum. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in the Waikato, State Highway 26 has closed between State Highway 2 and the Paeroa-Tahuna Road, that's the route between Paeroa and Aotearoa, because of a serious crash. On Auckland's southern motorway, a crash that was blocking the right lane northbound between Ellerslie-Pamuir and Green Lane has been cleared in the last 20 minutes. And you're also advised to avoid the southern motorway if you can because of pungent smoke in the area coming from an industrial premises that's ablaze in Onehunga. Our next news and weather are at 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Evie. They say cheese gives you weird dreams, but there is an actual nightmare brewing on Fromage Street. International experts claim Camembert and Brie could be on the verge of extinction due to a shortage of the mould the cheeses are made from. The mould that clones itself appears to be running out of gas, losing its ability to reproduce. Cal Oreur, artisan cheesemakers Whitestone are based in Oamaru. The boss, Simon Berry, joins us now. Kia ora, Simon. How serious is this? Really? Brie and Camembert endangered species?
Yeah, hi Lisa. It's of real concern, to be honest, a real concern. So all of the white mould that we use in New Zealand and around the world comes from a single strain out of France. So the strain is now being put on the endangered list, going back to a 1950s lab that isolated it, and it's been given these beautiful true properties that we enjoy, is now sort of facing extinction.
Do they know why things are gone awry, why this mould is not reproducing?
Going back to the beginnings, it was originally formed with a Brie and Camembert were formed in the natural cellars, and it was a natural rind. And then in the 1950s, they said, hang on, we've got a better strain here. They isolated a strain and said, this one's perfectly white. It was an albino strain, and we can replicate it in the lab. We can have consistent product. We can consistent mould. Away we go. Well, now that albino strain is running out of gas, and it was because it was isolated, it's asexually producing. So the fungi is basically a single genetic strain. Well, that gene is becoming tired. So it's not naturally producing and having variability, but because it's been consistently the same thing, it's a single strain, it's now getting tired. So now we're like looking, well, how are we going to replace this?
I do not want to diminish the mould, but for people who don't make cheese, is this sort of akin to a sort of sourdough starter in some ways? You get the mould, you do, from overseas, and it forms the basis of the production of your particular cheeses.
Yeah, so white mould grows on the rind and gives that beautiful white texture on the outside. It's a living, breathing organism, exactly like a yeast. Anything that we've got a natural product, so anything that's put in there, it's a natural ingredient, and it's come from the French mother strain. And now that mother strain is dying off.
Okay. In light of that, how are your supplies, Simon? And have you heard anything about whether you're going to be able to continue to get this through the year?
Yeah, well, at the moment our supplies are okay. However, we still buy it out of France. We bring it into New Zealand like every other cheesemaker comes from the single source. So we're nervous that we're going to place another order. We order about every 6 months. That they're just going to turn around and say, "Oh, sorry, it's no longer available." So that's a real concern. Hearing this, it's coming out of France, where the source is from globally. So it's a real concern for all cheesemakers.
Can you make your own mould?
That's the plan. So we've done it before with blue strains. We've got our own 2 blue strains already isolated and replicated. Like any natural ingredient, they have a lifespan. So yeah, we're beginning our talks now with our suppliers, or I guess our innovators in that world of microbiology. How are we going to tackle this?
So how long would that take to develop something that works and tastes the way you want it to and has the texture and all the rest of it from beginning to actually producing the product?
Yeah. Really, how long is a piece of string? A very difficult one there. We're firstly, can we find it in the natural environment? This is where they all come from. So it's called bioprospecting. We'll go and bioprospect now. We're New World producers. We can innovate and work our way around this. We can ideally come up with our own variable, very similar strain that might have better flavours. We might have better characteristics than the original coming out of the old world, out of Europe. We want to find one that's maybe superior, has better properties. So it might be exactly the same, but it could be better.
This fascinates me. So when you talk about bioprospecting, is that like people who go out truffle hunting? I mean, what do you do?
You look for these strains in the environment. So white mould growing on bread, for example, is that a Penicillium candium growing on there? You go into the environment, into haze. We found a blue strain out of a hay bale for a Penicillium rock 40. So we look it's called bioprospecting. You're prospecting around in the environment, looking for a floral natural strain, where they came from in the first place, a new one that's isolated, that's not producing toxins, is human friendly. And the real work is identifying that and then making sure that it's not toxic, which is done through a whole series of lab testings. Can it be brought into your plant? Can it cohabitate with other not natural floras? And then can it produce the flavours we want? So working with natural things, this is part of the excitement of cheese making, that you're working with these natural bacterias or living organisms, and we want to find another friendly one that has the same properties that we're looking for.
So you basically dispatch the Indiana Jones of cheese making to find you this?
That's right. We need to go and hunt this thing down, find it, isolate it, replicate it, make sure it's friendly, it's not going to fight, it's going to come and play the game and produce some fantastic flavours for the cheese community to enjoy.
Don't you worry, Simon. We're going to be all over this. We'll be wanting an update. Thank you for joining us. That is Simon Berry, who is the boss of Whitestone Cheese out of Oamaru. Serious business there. Mould running out for the production of camembert and brie. 10 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. An expedition's been launched to find new life deep below the ocean in unexplored territory off the coast of Aotearoa's South Island. The team of scientists will spend 21 days investigating the Bounty Trough system at depths down to 5,000 metres. The trip's led by the Ocean Census Alliance, a group made up of international marine scientists and groups that aim to discover 100,000 new species across the global ocean in the next decade. NIWA marine biologist Sadie Mills is the voyage co-leader.
We're looking for new species, from the little animals that live amongst the sand grain, which are called myofauna, to macrofauna that are maybe up to about 1 centimetre across, and then megafauna, so the animals that live on top of the sediment surface like starfish and crabs, and also fish swimming around above the seafloor as well. We're really hoping to discover things that nobody has seen before.
What makes you think that they are lurking down there?
So on our research expeditions, usually we will discover new things whenever we look in these habitats that haven't been looked at before. We do find new creatures. The area that we're going to survey on this expedition, the Bounty Trough, as I mentioned before, we've never actually taken any seafloor samples for looking for animals in that area before. So it's a really unexplored place. So that leads us to think that we will find new things. Yep.
So I see you're going as far down as 5,000 metres. What does that look like under the ocean? Pitch black?
Yep, it's pretty pitch black when you first go down there. We will be deploying a seafloor camera which has lights on, so we'll be able to see the seafloor when we go down there. But if we were to turn the lights off, it would be pitch black. It's very cold, around about 0 degrees down at the bottom, maybe just a couple of degrees. But then there's some creatures that use bioluminescence, so that's light that they emit from themselves. So you can have things like jellyfish and sea cucumbers and sea stars and some fish that use bioluminescence to attract other creatures or to frighten them away.
So they're like living torches?
Yeah, it's kind of like a deep sea disco down there.
Amazing. Now, what value is there in discovering these creatures?
So when we discover these creatures, it just helps us to understand what are all of the elements of that web of life. What are all the creatures, from the tiny little things that form the base of the food chain, so things that other bigger animals eat. What are they? How do they fit into this whole ecosystem? We also need to understand what these creatures are that we have in our New Zealand region, so that we can be able to afford them a protection. We don't know anything about them. Are they very rare, or are they very commonly living down there? And some of the impacts from things like climate change and other like human or natural induced impacts. What are the animals that we want to protect? Yep.
How exciting is it to find something new?
It is very exciting to find something new. It never gets old. I work in the invertebrate collection at NIWA, and so I'm in a very privileged position that I get to hear about some of these new discoveries quite soon after they happen. And I find it really fascinating to just get that enthusiasm from the expert when they've studied, for many, many years to understand the diversity of different animal groups. And then when they find a new one, just that like sheer excitement, like, oh, I've never seen this before, and this is kind of related to this other family that I've seen, but this is something new, and it's such a thrill. And we really need to know what we don't know about the ocean, and it's one of the very unexplored kind of places. There's an estimate that there's sort of 2 to 3 million species out there, and that we only know like a really small percentage of those. So yeah, it's really cool.
Pretty fascinating stuff. That is Sadie Mills. She is one of the voyage co-leaders, a NIWA marine biologist. Now, the Black Caps have just bowled out South Africa for 257 to win the first test match at Tauranga by 281 runs. The team was led to victory by Kyle Jamieson, who took 4 wickets. Mitch Santner took 3 off the back of those magnificent consecutive centuries by Kane Williamson, and a maiden double ton by Rachin Ravindra. Infamous for taking out Bird of the Year in 2021, the long-tailed bat is Aotearoa's only land mammal and one of our most endangered species. They're mostly found in the South Island, but one colony comes home to roost each night in, of all places, a central Hawke's Bay farm shed. While it makes them easy to monitor, conservationists are concerned about why they've picked that spot to hang out. Lauren Crimp spent the evening bat catching.
They sort of sound a bit like this.
Kay Griffiths from the Conservation Company gives us her best bat impression. But then we hear the real deal through a device called an automatic bat monitor. And around 9 o'clock, in the fading light, we spot one.
That was a bat, I don't know. Yeah, that was a bat, but I don't know whether it left or not. No, it just got into the trap, yes.
Kay Griffiths and her partner, Craig Single, have worked on ecological restoration for 20 years. But in the last few, their sights have been set on Peka Peka Tauroa, which is critically endangered, the highest threat level.
Without intervention, they will be extinct within 50 years.
So she was excited to hear from landowner Nick Perry, who first made the discovery in his shed while out feeding the cows a couple of years ago.
Just walking around with the nieces and standing in front of the shed here, and they started flying out over our heads, and we didn't know what they were. We thought that they were maybe swallows or something like that.
His 9-year-old niece, Evelyn Perry, was there too.
What do they look like?
Fuzzy black things.
And it turns out there's a lot of the fuzzy black things around. Kay Griffiths says there are about 45 in this colony alone, and they're possibly more widespread across central Hawke's Bay than any other area in the country.
We're sort of calling it Bat Central because we've got quite a lot of activity in lots of places, and they're probably roosting in all sorts of places, and there's probably lots of small colonies. But we don't know that. We don't know the size of the colonies at all, so that's sort of part of why we've got this funding.
But while an easily accessible shed is handy for research, it's not a standard setting. In their natural environment, bats shift roosts nearly every night, probably to avoid predators.
But here, they're returning here every night. So that kind of tells us that probably all their roosts that they know of around here are gone.
Big exotic trees chopped down to make room for development. It's a worry. But the bats will soon search for new roosts when breeding season is over. So the team want to find out where they go and hatch a plan to ensure those roosts are protected. The first step is catching them. Before it gets dark, harp traps are set up, a series of tall fences spread across the height and width of the shed with 2 vertical rows of fishing nylon.
And how it works is the bat flies through one, they're slightly offset, so then it doesn't get through the next one, and then they drop down and into the bag.
After that, it's time to scoop the bats from the trap and process them. They're all banded, then measured and weighed.
12.4.
Sexed.
The males are quite well endowed, so it's usually quite easy to tell.
Aged.
Yeah, no, he's an adult.
And fussed over, just a little.
Oh, look at that little guy.
And one's even lucky enough to be named before being released.
Can I know the name?
Cupcake.
I think that's a great name.
The conservation company can catch up with Cupcake and its colony next month, hopefully near new roosts, to learn more about them and help ensure their survival.
Love me some cute bats. After 6, we'll be talking to the Department of Corrections about recruitment issues.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Tēnā tātou, ko Ivy Ashton tēnei. Helicopters are dumping water on a major industrial fire in the Auckland suburb of Onehunga, and evacuations are underway. The blaze broke out on a large wood pile at the Gorilla Waste facility early this afternoon, sending smoke across the southern part of Auckland. RNZ reporter Louise Tenuth has told Checkpoint local residents and businesses have been told to mask up and avoid the area if possible.
Plenty of crew still out on the ground, and we've seen them evacuating residents and nearby businesses who are in the area, but it has been cordoned off with cones as well, so people are being diverted and traffic is being turned away.
Louise Tenuth says Waka Kotahi has warned motorists to avoid the southwestern motorway. There is already a major build-up of traffic and significant delays. Meanwhile, properties have been evacuated south of Nelson as firefighters battle a significant vegetation blaze in Tasman's Lee Valley. Fire and Emergency says there are 3 separate areas of fire spreading uphill into a pine plantation. 5 helicopters are supporting ground crews. Police have evacuated several nearby properties as well as local swimming spots. The government's confirmed it will no longer fund the cultural reports used in sentencings, saying they've cost taxpayers millions of dollars. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon says Section 27 reports were originally intended to allow family or friends of a defendant to tell a judge about their circumstances, but have instead turned into a moneymaker for professionals.
The intention was to be able to bring somebody in to explain your background and your history and things that may be useful context for a judge to determine sentencing. And over time it's become professionalised and, as I said it when we've described it before, a cottage industry.
Christopher Luxon says anyone can still ask people to advocate for them in court. A target to reduce the prison population by 30% is also being scrapped. ACT leader David Seymour remains confident that changing his coalition partners' minds on the treaty principles bill is possible if the public demands it. National and New Zealand First say they'll support the bill to the select committee stage, but no further. ACT has launched an information campaign hoping to gather enough public support to advance the bill to a referendum. But David Seymour isn't ruling out having another go if this attempt fails.
Well, sometimes these things can take a few goes. I'm hoping for a hole in one here as always, but if you look at end-of-life choice, there were 2 attempts at legislation. There was a fulsome select committee inquiry, and then euthanasia became legal with the End-of-Life Choice Act. That took 14 years. I certainly hope that this doesn't take that long.
David Seymour says the bill will be drafted in the next few months. Iwi leader Mike Smith says he hopes he gets a court date soon for his case against 7 big polluters. The Supreme Court has given him the green light to pursue his case against emitters including Fonterra, Z Energy and Genesis Energy. The ruling said there was no question that the window for securing a livable and sustainable future for all was closing. Mr Smith says he hopes that means he'll get a date soon, but he doesn't know yet.
No, we don't, but it needs to be fast, because and the judgment actually spoke about the window of opportunity closing, and so it's really good that they've picked up on that, and so hopefully they'll hear the case soon on the strength of that.
Genesis and Fonterra say the ruling will delay work on cutting emissions. The US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has arrived in Tel Aviv, where he'll discuss Hamas's response to a proposed ceasefire plan in Gaza with Israeli officials. The ABC's Chelsea Hetherington reports.
Antony Blinken's arrival in Israel comes after a day of talks with Egyptian and Qatari officials as part of his latest visit to the Middle East. They discussed a proposal for a new ceasefire in Gaza and the release of hostages, but the details of the deal have not been released. Hamas says it responded in a positive spirit, but has asked for amendments relating to returning Gazans to their homes, among other things. While Mr Blinken has given no indication of how the US views the response, President Joe Biden had this reaction.
But it seems to be a little over the top.
Mr Blinken will seek progress on the deal with Israeli officials today.
Timaru Airport has reopened following what Air New Zealand describes as bird activity that led to flight cancellations and the airport's closure this morning. The Civil Aviation Authority earlier said the Transport Accident Investigation Commission has opened an inquiry into what occurred, but the Commission says that is not the case. However, neither the Commission, the authority, nor the airline, nor Timaru District Council, which owns the airport, will clarify exactly what led to the airport's closure. Air New Zealand earlier said a flight to Wellington was aborted during takeoff due to the pilot's concern about bird activity in the takeoff path. And finally in sport, New Zealand have won the first cricket test against South Africa by 281 runs. Koinanga Pitupitu Kōrero. That's the news.
Kia ora, Emil here from The Night Show, which is probably one of the only places you'll hear a medieval historian chit-chatting about the grannies.
If you don't mind me saying first, I think Taylor Swift deserves more airtime.
Before launching into a discussion about a lost treasure trove of Catholic relics.
So they were put into coffee jars, bone and metal work reliquaries, and also some papers. And it's actually the papers that go into one of the coffee jars that tell us when they were put there.
Tune in tonight from 7 p.m. here on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're back on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday for Te Ika Maui, the North Island, except Wairarapa and Wellington. Generally fine weather, some cloudy areas, especially in the mornings and evenings. For Wairarapa and Wellington, partly cloudy, some rain tomorrow evening. Marlborough and Nelson, mainly fine. Isolated showers tomorrow afternoon and evening. Bulla, Westland and Canterbury, rain in South Westland, spreading elsewhere tomorrow morning. Then clearing to fine. Isolated showers about inland Canterbury tomorrow afternoon and evening. Otago, excluding Clutha. Cloudy periods today with isolated showers, mainly fine tomorrow. Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, remaining showers clearing this afternoon and becoming mostly fine. A few showers tomorrow. And Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It is 7 minutes past 6. I will have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Ngā mihi e ho, no mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Getting and keeping staff is one of corrections' biggest challenges in the face of a rising prison population, including violent extremist inmates. The department's launched yet another recruitment campaign. A briefing to the new minister says corrections is experiencing significant recruitment and retention challenges. On top of that, the national government's tough on crime policy is expected to increase the muster further. Neil Beals, Corrections Chief Custodial Officer, says it's not about finding enough people to do the job, it is about finding the right people.
We want the right person to come and work for corrections, so we're very strict about the criteria and the quality of the person that we take. So we will take our time to find the right person. We're not going to just take anybody. But look, we're also recruiting in a very competitive market as well, and it has been competitive for at least the last 18 months to 2 years. But we're getting there. Look, we have recruited a lot of staff. There's still a long way to go, but we're making positive inroads into that, and we're going to keep on doing that. Hopefully this new campaign will assist us in that.
Let's crunch some numbers. What are your current vacancies for prison officers and other staff like prison nurses?
So I can tell you that from prison officers, we're looking at the moment around about 330 that we need. We've normally have around about 4,011 established positions, but that will vary depending on prison population at any given time. Obviously, we work to ratios, and we have different security classifications. So those numbers will vary over the course of a year. But yeah, so from a corrections officer point of view, we're looking at about 330 odd. From the nurses, it's not normally an area I delve into at the moment, but I know that we've got I think a total of around about 56, 57 vacancies across the country. That will again vary from site to site. Very, very critical people to help with our operation. The nurses, our healthcare and our custodial staff work closely together. We can't do the job alone, so it's important that we recognise this when we recruit.
How many people are leaving? What are your attrition rates?
Again, that will vary. The attrition rate has dropped over the last...
Neil.
To be honest, I think and I could be wrong about this, Lisa, but I think it's somewhere sitting around about that 20% mark, maybe a bit higher. That has dropped.
That seems exceedingly high, Neil.
It's much higher than what it used to be, most definitely, and we experienced a spike post-COVID. We used to be one of the lowest services, in government with our retention rates, but that has gone up for various reasons. But we are now seeing that come down, and we're seeing people staying with us for all the right reasons. Obviously, you'll be aware from last year's, collective bargaining. Our unions have done a very good job for their staff. They've come up with a good agreement. Hopefully, that encourages people to stay with us. But look, it is a
so
good
Neil,
job, a great job to have.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but given the figure, what you're saying that approximately 20% of your staff is your turnover number, are you recruiting at a rate sufficient to even keep up with attrition?
At the moment, our recruitment is going in a positive direction. So we know that out of the so we've recruited 1,097 into the corrections officer role since October 22. 816 recruited started to work. There's a further 218 currently in training. We're just going to keep on doing that. So we're
but
not
are you
going to take
keeping up with the numbers leaving the job, Neil? That's what I'm asking you. Are you currently keeping pace with the numbers of people leaving the job?
It is getting better. I'm saying there's more work to do in that space. It will vary from site to site.
So is the answer no, Neil? This is really important. Yeah. Is the answer that you are not keeping up with attrition?
No, Lisa, I think it's important to understand the context. Some of our sites are absolutely fine. and there is no issues there in terms of retention. Some of our more problematic sites where we do have it, particularly in the inner cities, that's where we have to focus on. So it's not a case of saying we're not keeping up with attrition across the board. We have got context to apply here in terms of, where we are, where the site is, the job market that site is in, and that's where we need to focus our efforts. Hence why we have the new campaign. We're focusing on the area that we need. We know that we need not only to ramp up with our recruitment, but our retention activities as well need to get better. Okay. So, it's a very complex issue.
You mentioned the new campaign. It focuses on getting out of difficult, potentially violent and life-threatening situations, and the ones that I've seen. Why do you think that would encourage people to sign up?
We've got to be realistic about the job that we do. There is no point in trying to convince people to come for a job and tell them that it's going to be, a land of milk and honey. We do a very, very difficult, sometimes dangerous job. It is a rewarding job, but we need to be real with people and say, look, some of the people that we work with can be quite challenging. Some of them can be quite mentally ill. Some of them have got alcohol or drug issues. You need to be prepared for the world that you're walking into. And if we don't do that, we're not being fair to the people, and then we'll see a higher attrition rate, right? So we need to recruit the right person. We need to train them appropriately, and then we need to support them properly when they come into the workplace. If we can't do those three, we will not get to where we need to be into a more stable employment situation.
Starting salary is about 65,000K, isn't it? Roundabout?
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
Round about that. Yep.
So in your briefing to the new minister, you said that you're increasingly involved in the management of violent extremism, counter-terrorism and transnational organised crime. That's a lot to deal with for $65,000 a year, isn't it?
Look, it absolutely is. The world of prisons are changing, and they're changing quickly, and we're not the only country to experience that. I speak to my colleagues around the world. They're seeing similar issues. So is that
enough, Neil, bottom line? Is that enough for the stresses, the risk and the complexities of the job? And I know that you've had negotiations and pay rises, but is that enough?
Look, I will always be the first to say, having been an officer for most of my career, that I think, the job that we do will always deserve more, and if I had it my way, if it was a personal decision up to me, of course, we would be paying our staff more. Money is not the only thing, of course, but it's an important thing. But it's about the right kind of pay, the right kind of support, good pathways for their progression, a workplace that is safe, a workplace that keeps them interested and occupied. All of these things go into making the job worthwhile. But look, if you're asking me, should we pay staff more? Could we pay staff more on a personal level? I'd love to pay staff more, and I think they deserve every penny of it.
How many international recruits have you taken on?
I couldn't give you that number, Lisa. I'd have to come back to you on that one.
But are you getting staff from the international market?
Well, I don't believe that we are actively recruiting in the international market the way we did some years ago at this point in time, but we always have interest from abroad. We have a lot of interest, obviously, from the islands. We have interest from Europe. We even have some interest from people in Australia, although they are competing with us in the same market. But I don't believe we are running at this moment in time a full-on recruitment abroad at this point. But that's not to say that we can't do that.
Okay. Corrections has a Hokairangi strategy, expressing your commitment to achieving better outcomes and delivering improvements for Māori. Is that still your strategy under this current government?
It's certainly our strategy, and that hasn't changed for us. We still need to make sure that we do more for Māori who come to prison. We know what those numbers are. Those numbers are still significant. Over half of our population, and even more so in the female population, identifies Māori. If we can get those numbers down, that's better for everybody.
So in terms of recruitment of Māori frontline staff, how many have you brought on?
Again, I'd have to come back with those numbers. I'm at the airport now and I don't have access to those numbers. But,
Is it a priority? Is it a priority for you, Neil?
It's certainly a priority for us to make sure that we are represented right across the spectrum of our diversity. But, I wouldn't say that we are focusing on one particular ethnic group over another. We want the right person.
And Corrections has just corrected Neil Beale's figures on attrition rates. As at the 31st of January, the rate of attrition for prison officers is sitting at 13.5%, and across of all of Corrections staff, it is 13%. It's 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A major report in Australia has found consumers are paying prices that are too high too often. The report was carried out by the former chair of the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. Alan Fels says banks, supermarkets, aviation and energy companies are exploiting their market power in ways that drive up inflation and hurt Australian households. He found rising prices were not just caused by true inflation, but often by greed, corporate gouging and profit pushing.
My conclusion is that Australians are paying prices that are too high too often, and that the cause is weak and ineffective competition in too many sectors of the economy. Two policies are needed. First, the Australian government needs to act on high prices, to investigate their nature and causes, and where possible, their remedies. The remedies don't include price controls, but there is much that governments can do. Secondly, greatly strengthen competition policy to remove or weaken market power, which enables the excessive prices to be charged.
He's called on the government to act on companies with too much market power.
The fact is that a monopoly or dominant firm can charge as much as it likes in Australia. And duopolists, providing they don't illegally communicate, can also charge high prices, higher even than would be the case maybe if they were an illegal cartel. And governments themselves frequently sanction very high prices by restricting competition. For example, refusing additional Qatar flights into Australia let Qantas charge prices about 30% higher than otherwise.
And Fowles says businesses have a duty to act as well.
When costs fall, business prices fall slowly to the ground like a feather. It's very profitable to delay price falls. A recent example, well known, concerns meat. Now, as inflation starts to fall, I'm concerned there may be a rockets and feathers effect on prices. We want business to play its role. Having played a role in getting prices up, we want it to play a role in getting them down, like rockets, not feathers.
That is report author Alan Fowles. Back home now, and properties are being evacuated and people have been asked to leave local swimming spots near a significant blaze in Tasman. Fire and Emergency say there are 3 separate areas of fire spreading uphill into a pine plantation in Lee Valley. Nelson reporter Sam G is at the scene and joins us now. What do we know so far, Sam?
Sure, Lisa. So we know that there are firefighters from about 9 brigades responding to the fire that's in the Lee Valley, and there's an aerial attack underway. Helicopters are using monsoon buckets. At about 5:30, the last report we had, the fire was estimated to have covered about 3 hectares and it's not yet been contained.
So properties evacuated, what is the landscape like? Are there many homes nearby?
So we know that there have been 11 houses on River Terrace Road, which is between the Lee Valley Bridge over the Wairau River and Mead Road, that have been evacuated by police. A civil defence centre for evacuees has been opened too in Lord Rutherford Drive. It's not a densely populated area, but it is obviously a one-way road up into the valley, so police are working to get people out of there in the area that's affected.
What can you tell us about road closures?
So I know that up at the bridge over the Wairau Gorge, the road is closed from there. I'm not sure about wider road closures. I'm actually on River Terrace Road at the moment, so I'm looking up towards the valley, can see sort of a plume of smoke coming up from there, and you can hear the helicopters working. And the road is not hugely busy, but there is a bit of movement on it. I saw some forestry utes and then a truck with a massive digger on the back heading up that way, potentially, I'm guessing, to get in there and help out.
Samantha, also, can you just kind of describe conditions and what they've been like in Tasman at the moment?
Yeah, so we've had really hot weather here for quite some time. We had a little bit of a cold snap a couple of days ago, but it is pretty hot and dry. So I think the car was telling me it was about 25 degrees on the way out here. Where I'm standing, there's very little wind. I'm not sure if it's windier up the valley, but it's fair to say that it's hot and it's pretty dry.
Thanks for the update, Samantha. That is Samantha G, who's joining us there live from near that blaze in Tasman. Another fire burning in Onehunga, the Auckland suburb of Onehunga. We've had an update from Fire and Emergency. They say the large timber and waste fire in Onehunga is now contained. Around 40 firefighters, supported by 2 helicopters, are working to extinguish the fire, which is currently measuring 50 by 30 metres. There is also damage to a building within the site. Fire and emergency crews are expected to remain at the scene overnight and into tomorrow. Evacuations which took place earlier today were of neighbouring commercial properties. There were no residential evacuations, they say. Households and workplaces in the area of the fire should continue to keep windows and doors closed. So if you're nearby, you can see or smell that. Keep your windows and doors closed. Anyone in the vicinity is advised to keep out of the smoke altogether. If the smoke causes respiratory problems, please ring Healthline for free advice. That number is 0800... Is that an 8 or a 6? I don't have my glasses on. Okay, so what we're going to do is put that on our website. Otherwise, I'm likely to give you the wrong number. But they say you should also see your doctor if you're having any problems breathing and chest pain. So Healthline, if you're concerned about that. Now, Fire and Emergency asks the public to avoid the southern area of Victoria Street and Nelson Street to allow emergency services to access the area where the fire is. So an update there on the Onehunga fire. A Michigan jury has found the mother of a teenager guilty of manslaughter for a shooting her son carried out. 15-year-old Ethan Crumbley fatally shot 4 classmates at a high school near Detroit. Jennifer Crumbley is believed to be the first parent to face a manslaughter charge in the US stemming from a school shooting by their child. Prosecutors successfully argued she bore responsibility because she and her husband gave their son a gun and ignored warning signs of violence. CNN's Darren Cunningham reports.
Amazed at how nervous I was when the verdict came through, because I thought I know what I wanted it to be, but I didn't think I'd be that worried, and I was so grateful.
Stacey Broder, who felt anxious November 30th, 2021, wondering if her child was okay, felt anxious again today. Then a sense of relief when the jury read the guilty verdict in the Jennifer Crumbley case. The mother, now convicted of failing to intervene when her son, the Oxford shooter, needed help before he killed 4 classmates.
She just stepped in. Nobody buys their kid a gun when they think they're having problems. At least I don't think they should. I hope it tells parents that they need to, she said things like, I didn't look at their text messages. Your 13 and 14-year-olds, look once in a while. We're not saying you have to put a mic on them and follow them everywhere, but you really need to be on top of it.
Like Broder, Andrea Jones, another Oxford parent, believes this case provides some insight and creates an expectation for James Crumbley's trial next month.
He has the added element of he was the one who purchased the gun, and I think that's going to be pretty damning for him.
Regardless, the outcome in Jennifer's case sets a precedent never seen before.
I don't feel that this case is going to take away anybody's parental rights. I feel that it is an extreme situation for a parent to be charged with involuntary manslaughter because of something that their child did. It's not something that's taken lightly, and there's criteria that has to be met to even bring those charges.
Mrs. Crumbley's husband, James, faces the same charges in a trial next month. A federal court of appeal has ruled Donald Trump does not have presidential immunity and can be prosecuted on charges of plotting to overturn the 2020 election. The former president had argued his executive immunity meant he should not face charges for criminal acts, but the 3-judge panel rejected that claim. Trump is expected to appeal the decision. The BBC's Gary O'Donoghue has more.
Of all the cases Donald Trump is facing, this is the most serious one, and it deals with those accusations that he tried to overturn the 2020 election. Now, he'd argue that he had immunity from prosecution because these were acts he took as president. The court said that wasn't true and that he was now Citizen Trump, not President Trump, and did not enjoy those kinds of immunities. Now, Donald Trump's strategy has always been to try and delay these cases for as much as possible, and he will appeal to the Supreme Court. If he can delay things long enough so the trial doesn't take place until after November's election, and he wins that election, he can make all this just go away. The problem for him is that if the trial goes ahead before the election and he's convicted, there are large numbers of voters in key marginal states who are telling the pollsters, at least, they won't vote for a convicted felon. The timing and the outcome of this case is crucial, not just to this election, but to the future of American politics.
Relatives of soldiers fighting in Ukraine have protested in Moscow, calling for the return of their husbands, brothers and sons. As they laid carnations at the tomb of the unknown soldier near the Kremlin, police temporarily detained some 20 journalists covering the rally. Deutsche Welle's Thomas Anderson reports.
For months, these women have been calling for their husbands to be brought home from the fighting in Ukraine. Riding a fine line, it's indefinite tours of duty they're protesting, but not the war itself.
I act in the interests of my family and of my child. My daughter has the right to be raised in a complete family and has the right to be raised by her father. And here we are, precisely those women who need their husbands alive at all costs, that's all.
And how long do you plan to come here?
Until our men are home.
What if your actions come under pressure or there is pushback? If the situation changes, how will you react?
Creatively.
I wanted to bring flowers in memory of the fallen soldiers. I want them mobilized to come home. We are a family with many children. My husband is there on Ukrainian front and we need him.
With strong public sentiment behind them, Putin's government let the protests of these military wives go under the radar until today, when police cracked down. Not on the women themselves, but on the media for covering it. With the Russian presidential election coming up in March, authorities appear set on stopping the wives' stories from continuing to reach the Russian public.
OK, before we head off, we've got an update on that fire in Nelson. Firefighters from 9 brigades are responding to the fire in Lee Valley, supported by aerial attack from helicopters with monsoon buckets. This is from Fire and Emergency New Zealand. 11 houses on River Terrace between the Lee Valley Bridge over the Wairoa River and Mead Road have been evacuated by police. Nelson Tasman Civil Defence has opened a Civil Defence Centre for evacuees at Wanderers Club Rooms on Lord Rutherford Drive if you need somewhere to stay. Further information on that support is available by calling 0354 38400. 0354 38400. As at 5:30 this evening, the fire is estimated to cover about 3 hectares and is not yet contained. They are asking people to stay well away from the area so emergency services are not held up by non-essential traffic. Also, there are drones. Those people with drones must not fly them in the area. When drones are spotted, the helicopters have to be grounded for safety reasons. So park your drones in the meantime because you're interrupting fighting of that fire. Now, the late news team is going to keep you updated throughout the night. If you missed anything from the program, you can find us Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts from. And ko te kaupapa tuatahi Apopo, tomorrow from 5 a.m, First Up gets cooking in a ghost kitchen. A ghost kitchen? What is that? Well, you'll have to tune in to find out. 5 a.m. tomorrow morning for First Up. We'll catch you a little later in the day. Enjoy your evening and thanks for joining us.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Tēnā tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. The Prime Minister says National won't be supporting Act's Treaty Principles Bill beyond the Select Committee stage, even if there is public support.